It's Saturday, October 18th, and some widespread severe weather is expected to impact the United States today, with our risk area stretching all the way from the Gulf Coast of the US all the way up into southern Michigan. I wouldn't even put out a severe weather outbreak out of the picture today either. I definitely think that's definitely in play. Of course, our main area of concern is going to be within this slight risk. It kind of covers a lot of area and it's centered on Arkansas. Then we have a marginal risk, which covers that really wide area that I just mentioned. We also have a really big area where we could potentially see some thunderstorms stretching all the way back from parts of eastern New Mexico all the way up to the US-Canada border in parts like New York, Michigan, and Ohio. So yeah, definitely a lot of weather that we're expecting today. The main thing, however, with this is that it's just going to be a big wind threat more than anything. I wouldn't be surprised to see some 70-mile-an-hour gusts, though, specifically in this region's parts of southern Missouri and Arkansas. I think that's really going to be the hot spot today. The SPC agrees with that. That's where that 15% chance is kind of centered on, and that 5% covers the rest of our marginal risk. Now, for hail, it's going to be a really different story. It's only going to cover the farthest western parts that we're expected to see the storms track through today, and we'll talk about that why in a bit. I wouldn't really expect to see anything over 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter today. Nothing crazy, but we do have a really widespread tornado risk today. Actually, that main risk area is going to be kind of centered on that area, southern Missouri and Arkansas, like I was talking about with that wind risk. And then we also have a 2%, which stretches all the way up into parts of Indiana, and a bit more east and west of our 5% risk as well. I don't really think we'll see anything super big, likely just going to be for some spin up tornadoes along a QLCS line of storms, maybe even a couple of MCSs embedded in there, but I don't really think we're going to see anything super crazy. Maybe a couple of stronger spin up tornadoes wouldn't potentially completely eliminate that from the picture, but yeah, that's going to be what we're seeing today on the front. And this gives us a really good look of what we're going to be dealing with. First and foremost, we're going to have some remnants of some storms that we're going to be dealing with around daybreak, specifically up here in the more northern regions of our risk. I'm talking about parts of Illinois and Michigan. I don't really think these will be severe, though, just some rainy, kind of outflowy, messy storms. Our first severe weather is likely not going to pop up until a little bit before lunch. We're going to start to see storm initiation along a cold front. Then, of course, that really big trough that's going to start to dig in and really increase in strength as we go through the day. In this earliest part of our storm mode, that's when we're going to see our storms be a little bit more isolated. That's when they're going to have the highest chance to produce some hail. Once again, don't really think we're going to see anything over 1.5 to 2 inches. I don't even really think we're going to see anything much over 1.5 inches today, even if that. But that is when that hail risk is really going to maximize. I also think really around lunchtime in parts of that southern Missouri and Arkansas risk area, which I really think is going to be the hot spot for everything. We could also see some of the highest sizes of hail today there as well. Now, a couple of areas which are going to be some hot spots, like I already mentioned, that southern Missouri and Arkansas area, of course, for some damaging winds and that spin up tornado risk. That's going to be for a couple of reasons. One is going to be because that low pressure center is going to be right behind it. That just means that the shear for all hazards of severe weather is really going to be the most favorable in this region. And our shear vectors are also kind of parallel to this line, which gives it a little bit more knack of spinning some things up in there. Why that spin up tornado threat. It's going to be a bit more prevalent today than the HRRR is kind of predicting a lull, kind of stretching through Illinois and then parts up near maybe northern Indiana. There might be some more storms because it'll be a little bit more isolated, and there's also expected to be another kind of low pressure system embedded in here, maybe bringing some better shear to those. But this is really going to last all the way through the day. I think by a little after nightfall, these storms are really just going to transition into mostly a flooding threat. Still going to be some gusty outflow winds, but I think pretty much everything of severe proportions is going to be done at this time. Maybe we get a couple of weird things off of some outflow behind our main line, but I think it's going to be pretty much stabilized. It's just going to be a flooding threat at this point after nightfall. And then moving a little bit more south in areas like Texas and Louisiana, didn't really get a chance to see this from the last vantage point from the HRRR, but I think what we're going to be looking at mainly down here is just a damaging wind threat and then maybe a hail threat in the very early stages of these storms. I just don't think the shear from this low pressure system is going to be good enough to really see a strong tornado threat, specifically in this more southerly region. Definitely not a 0% chance either, though. So I wouldn't rule out any tornadoes down here. I just think that chance of seeing anything strong or seeing anything in general is going to be much lower. So definitely more of a hail and damaging wind threat down here. And I think that damaging wind threat will probably be a bit lower. I don't really think we'll see anything over 65. However, I think the main saving grace for these storms is that they're not really going to have as much to deal with. They're going to be a bit more isolated because they'll be on the more southern portions of our lines, and also the cape in front of them will be a little bit better, being around 2500 instead of the 1500 stuff that we're dealing with in our main region up here. So definitely I think severe weather is going to be possible in this region, just not as strong as that main area in parts of southern Missouri and then central to northern Arkansas. And here's our jet stream. This is going to be one of the main factors for why we're seeing such a big system today. And obviously, it's going to be with this really big trough that's going to be kind of moving in, and it's really only going to be strengthening as we go through the day. That's going to provide quite a bit of forcing, as well as a couple of embedded short waves within this as well, to kind of force up our storms, really create that explosive upward motion, really get them going, and why we're going to see a lot of organized storms. This is also bringing quite a bit of organizing shear to the region as well. And here's a weather sounding. This just gives us a basic rundown on the ingredients in front of our main line. One of the things to notice here is that we're definitely going to have a little bit more cape nearing that 1300 to 1500 region. Another thing to note for our severe wind risk is that our precipitable water is going to be a little bit higher, 1.53 inches. That also means that we could see a little bit more of a flooding threat as well. Our cloud bases are going to be absolutely low enough to support that spin up tornado threat. And our low level shear and low level helicity, specifically our low level shear at 20 knots, is going to be quite good for a spin up tornado risk. And then our bulk shear nearing that 40 knot threshold for some really organized storms. Definitely think these storms are going to be able to get organized, and especially in the early stages. One of the reasons why I think we could see a pretty brief hail threat, but definitely a hail threat during that time, maybe some hail in that 1.5 to 2 inch in diameter range, because our bulk shear is going to be a little bit higher. Because our bulk shear is higher, this also means that we could potentially see these storms last a little bit longer in their severe state. Other things to note from a more thermodynamics perspective, our dew point definitely going to be high enough, 65 dew point, and our low level lapse rate is going to be pretty solid in the low levels. Gets a little bit shaky as we go up, but in the lower levels, it being pretty high is going to support that spin up tornado threat and that damaging wind threat a little bit more for sure. Now, one thing to note is that as these storms kind of persist, the environment in front of them is actually going to get kind of stabilized out a little bit, because the cloud tops are going to kind of overspread the region in front. So this is something kind of around the midday, a little after midday, maybe early afternoon period that this sounding was taken from. So definitely the environment is going to change throughout the day. A couple of things are going to happen. The shear is going to get a little bit better in front of our storms, but our cape is going to get a little bit worse. So there's definitely a trade-off there, and that kind of has some questions with how our storms will evolve and how long they will last. But I think the consensus is that we'll definitely be seeing severe weather all the way from a little bit before lunch until nightfall. And the final thing we're going to just take a very quick peek at is going to be our actual flood risk issued by the SPC. We can see that our biggest flood risk is going to be in that main area, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, which I also think will have the highest chance of seeing some strongest severe weather out of really anywhere in this giant area that I think will receive severe weather. Maybe around 2 to 6 inches, kind of a really big range within this region, but definitely be prepared for some excessive rainfall, maybe a couple of flash flooding warnings in this marginal risk area. Not really something that's as urgent, just in that 1 to 3 inch range for some rainfall. Still want to be aware for some flash flood warnings if you're in this area though, and just want to be weather aware and know that there is going to be a lot of rain in your area if you're in this green marginal region as well.